start. My name is Leonidas, but most people just call me Leonidas. My pronouns are they, them, or just any neopronouns or gender-neutral pronouns at that. And I am here representing the youth organization Trans and Nonbinary Youth today. We're a peer group that is solely based on donations at the moment, and we are all made out of trans people. So everyone working for and working with trans and non-binary youth is trans, and it's also a trans and non-binary and questioning space. So for younger people, so that there's some spaces that aren't like cis focused. That was kind of our goal. And I mostly do counseling there. I'm mostly like do take care of the kids there and do stuff like that. I'm not like the biggest organization person. But yeah, I'm really, really happy to be here today. And also I'm really happy that I get to experience and be with and hear from so many young trans people in Vienna.
Yeah. My name is Rhonda. My pronouns are she, her, or also pairs, shortened from person. I'm on the board of FINIP, which stands for Verein Nicht-Binär, which is a non-binary support organization, creating visibility, but also fighting for acceptance and also legal things in Austria. We exist since 2021. Before that, some of the people that founded FINIP were already in the non-binary support peer group called Gender Galaxy. That exists since 2016. And I do a fair amount of educational or content or speeches at demonstrations, panel discussions, discussions about movies or similar, whatever comes the way.
Let's talk about visibility. Why is the Trans Day of visibility important, and how has it changed in the last few years?
I still gotta think about it. Do you have an answer right now? Because get a process.
Well, visibility is often still an issue for trans people. A fair amount of society expects us to blend into the system, like not being seen as trans or being considered as trans. And while a lot of safety comes with blending in and not having good passing and not being recognized as being trans, it still comes with the downside that looking trans might be something bad, or so to say, and being visible as a trans person is a quite radical position and statement. Especially, it's a huge fuck up against patriarchy, which needs this clear definition of two genders and nothing else. That's why all the right-wing organizations bring up, there are only two genders, completely ignoring that intersex people exist, and also trying to force trans people into invisibility.
Big agree on that, and also as a gender fluid person, for me it's visibility is sort of freedom, and visibility, being visible in my identity and not being erased for once, would mean liberation to me, because most people in the system and the system in general systemically erase, like you said, identities that do not fit the binary. However, I also have to say, these are not my personal experiences, but the Trans Day of Visibility has been also criticized, which I get from the community within, because and what I want to say today is what a lot of people, I think, especially cis people from outside, don't get is that visibility alone is good, but it's sometimes not enough, because with visibility often also, like you said, comes the danger of being seen as visibly trans, and that is still to this day inherently endangering. And I think in that way, how it changed, I think it maybe even became worse in some places in the world, at least, like the US. I can't speak for Austria because I've not been in the community or shared a community for a long time. I've only been here in Vienna for 2 years, but I feel like it's maybe even becoming more legally dangerous in some places to be visibly trans. And visibility is great and is inspiring, but without protections from the state or anything, or people actually being our allies, it doesn't mean a lot, which I think a lot of people should get more, that they actually need to be active allies for us to genuinely be able to celebrate the trans day of visibility. And this is especially true for trans femme people, who often get a very dangerous sort of hyper-visibility by being stereotyped by politicians, etc. Obviously, this is not something I can personally talk about, but I've heard and seen it happen. So, yeah. Yeah, this is sort of like the darker side of it, but visibility, like I said, is liberating, if it wasn't for the system.
How would you like define being a true ally?
Show up, genuinely show up for us. It's like, it's easier said than done, but I feel like a lot of cis people, what a lot of cis people start with and stuff is like using correct pronouns and changing their language. All of that is super important. And I feel like that is already a bit in the zeitgeist with like pronouns in bio and stuff like that. But genuinely actually start to show up, and also show up for people that you might not personally understand. Because what I hear a lot from cis people is, oh, I don't understand your gender identity. Can you water it down for me to make it more palatable, right? Especially as a non-binary person. But I feel like if you don't understand something, that's fine. But don't question it, or at least still support this person, and don't try to don't force people. What I've seen a lot is cis people forcing trans people to be more palatable to their tastes, to their binary thinking. And that's something I feel like needs to stop. And in general, also right now, during these political times, genuinely show up, march with us in the streets, help your friends by building actual solidarity, like housing them, giving them food, etc. Because a lot of trans people, sadly, are also suffer from poverty because they are trans. So stuff like that. I feel like there needs to be more focus on people actually helping other people survive in these times, especially.
Yeah, there's a lot useful things there, especially adapting language, learning how to better speak about trans people. One core point is, don't only do this when trans people are around, but especially then when stand up for us, be there for us when we are not there.
Yeah.
So don't do it like in a performative way so that you feel better when we are around, but also do it in times when we are not there to pat you on the back for it.
That's so important, yeah.
Because that makes a huge difference also in how we can see you in the end, how we can see you. And it's not trans related, but I once wrote a poem to a friend of mine who was shutting herself away because she didn't feel cheerful, happy enough about things. And the important thing is to be there for us in rough times when things are not working out well enough, but put yourself also, like, be the shield for us when things come up. Defend us, even when things get rough, and it might in the end have an impact on your own. Which is something we hear from Black people all the time. To fight racism, white people have to be at the forefront and defending Black people, and also taking up the aim, so to say, and not just standing behind them, patting their back, and it's in all these areas, like with sexism, men should stand up against other men who are sexists, and not just, he's like that, but he's still a good friend, and I'm not going to challenge him for that. So it works on all these layers, and especially what you said before, that trans femmes are more in the...
They have this sort of hyper visibility in society that they're sort of always used, for example, as a straw man by politics.
Exactly.
Or straw woman in that case.
Also because of betrayed patriarchy in a very real sense.
Yeah.
Right.
And it comes down to intersectionality, because it's the intersection of sexism and transphobia that leads to that trans femmes are more scrutinized in that sense. Yeah. And when you have other layers on top of that, like people of color are especially targeted, and if you have disabilities,
there's always intersecting areas, and that makes it harder. What I feel is very important, what you said before, is the performativeness of it. I feel like you, as an ally, you have to actively learn, and what you also have to actively learn is to actually care about and love these people and engage with them as people and not as brownie points with any oppressed, marginalized group, also with trans people.
Yeah.
To actually, care about them.
I think that's a really interesting point. I think a lot of times in activism, we don't focus enough on the fact that you need to people skills and developing your people skills is a radical act.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
If you do not generally like people, it's really hard to organize with people that you don't like or that you don't care for in any meaningful way.
Yeah. You need to love more trans people and have more trans people in your life. I'm so serious. I'm telling this to cis people listening right now, but I feel like more cis people need more trans people in their lives that they love and care about. Because there's also sort of a phenomenon of a lot of trans people being or feeling isolated from society.
Yeah. And you can't be selective of your support in that sense. Yeah. Like what I mentioned, why I mentioned the intersections, the different layers, is because there are people of color who are trans, there are disabled people who are trans. And if you don't stand up against ableism, if you don't stand up against racism, you're not, in the end, you're not standing up for trans people as a whole group. Because trans people are super diverse, like every other group out there.
Absolutely. And I feel like this is a really important point, because this is something that also some trans people have to learn. Because just because you're trans doesn't mean you're free from other biases, obviously, and you have to stick with your community and also unlearn other biases you might have. If we go deeper into that, I'm opening a whole part, but
Before we started talking, we were talking about sort of the fracturing of the queer community, specifically around the issue of trans people and them being targeted, and how many queer people are somewhat taking the bait of saying, hey, we can have all our rights if we sacrifice trans people in this, very craven way. And so in the umbrella of queerness, are we seeing like a lot of support from the general queer community, cisgendered, gay, lesbian, bi folks?
I know a few people that I dearly love for standing up. It definitely could be more, but I think the bigger, broader part of the queer community is not opposed to trans people in a sense. And if you really think about it, it doesn't even make sense, because all the queer community as a whole is fighting against patriarchy. The whole existence of trans people in itself is already shaking up patriarchy. So we don't have to be very active or do very much active work in that sense to fight against patriarchy, because our sheer existence is already shaking it. But on the other side, lesbian and gay people are also shaking patriarchy in that sense, because heteronormativity is a big part of patriarchy, and it's all intertwined in that sense. And if you're moving out of that, you're already putting a target on yourself in that sense.
I think at the core of it is, just because you have an identity doesn't mean that you have any political understanding or context of that identity, right?
Yeah.
For most of us, being gay, being bisexual, being trans is not a choice. It's something that we just are. But that doesn't magically create some level of political awareness, right?
And I feel like that's a problem, because there's people, like you said, privileged enough to take the bait. I love this expression of it. Yeah, they're taking the bait. They're taking the bait from conservatives and actually trashing their own community with it, because they are privileged enough to say, okay, we can just drop the T, we can just drop trans people, because then we are seen as more palatable. It's just assimilation, really, and it's an assimilation tactic. And I do feel like this is something that I've seen also implicitly. I feel like I agree with Rhonda when you said that most of the community doesn't really have a problem with trans people. Absolutely. But I also feel like the mainstream parts of the community also doesn't really do enough for trans people on the other side. They might not actively hate us. That's one extreme. But I feel like a lot of cis gays, cis lesbians, cis bis, it's mostly cis gay men, maybe also from my perspective, because I have engaged with cis gay men a lot. But they don't really think of the trans perspective at all, or don't think it has anything to do with them. And I feel like, from what I've heard and seen in lesbian spaces, it has gotten a lot better, especially in Vienna, with the trans inclusive, with the mindfulness of trans women, of trans people, also trans masks in their midst. With gay men, especially in Vienna, this hasn't really reached that point yet. I feel like lesbians and bi women are more mindful of it. Generally, I don't want to do blanket statements, because obviously there's also TERF groups and stuff like that are women focused. But I feel like in mainstream gay men spaces, it is still extremely common to, for example, segregate based on genitals, which I've experienced firsthand at a very popular gay party, which I will not name, in Vienna, that explicitly did not let trans men, even though they were men, participate. I feel like this is just sort of accepted still in the gay community, that it's very genital, very, very bioessentialist focused still. And I feel like this needs to change. And there are many cis gay men that are dear to me and who I know that they would stand up for trans people in a heartbeat. But there's also a lot that still don't really know or aren't willing to learn yet. And I feel like that's a bit sad. And obviously, like we also talked about, whole homonationalism movement is a thing. I feel like that comes from all directions, from lesbians, from gays. It's just conservatives, really, it boils down to that. And I feel like it's in general obviously just an assimilationist tactic to sort of get yourself in hetero society, live a normalized life, and throw those under the bus who can't or don't want to. So, yeah. But yeah, that's just how I feel. But I really don't want to trash a whole group. It's just what I've observed from my own experience. But it's very important to me to also mention and to really say there's allies and amazing people and great people on all sides of it, and there's no group that is more transphobic than the other.
You're so diplomatic.
Yeah. I really wanna how do you say that? Yeah, I wanna get that out there, because I feel like this is not helping if I would like trash one specific group or anything. What happens a lot, I feel like, with lesbians, there's just mean lesbian turf stereotype. For example, like some cis lesbians are immediately regarded with suspicion or stuff like that. I don't know, like it's about every identity in the community. There's like this whole bi women are actually hetero shit and stuff like that. So I don't want to get that out there. I don't want to get any stereotypes out there, because I don't want to say gay men are more prone to transphobia or anything, but I want to tell you, gay communities in Vienna, just please do better and be more mindful. That's just my plea. Yeah.
Yeah, some people are just ignorant of the history where queer rights actually came from, where Pride started, what happened at Stonewall, who was fighting at the forefront. It was Sylvia Rivera, it was Marsha P. Johnson, and I think it was the year after, or 2 years after, where the gay community booed Sylvia Rivera taking the stage, and it was a very, very powerful speech there that she gave, and which clearly showed how much trans people were always in the fight for queer rights. But on the other hand, I don't want to say, hey, you owe us something. You still have to see us as humans.
But we've always been one community.
Yeah.
This idea that trans people were invented in 2024 or whatever has got to stop. This has been, since the beginning of queerness, trans people have been a massive part of that.
Exactly. And also, like the drag community, the overlap of the sort of safe space for trans people to live to their true self within the drag community, because they couldn't otherwise, because of oppression and things, and live their true self out in the drag community. There is a huge overlap, which doesn't help with the general public having a misunderstanding between what's drag and what's trans, but that's something that we can figure out at some point.
But obviously there's a huge overlap because, like said, we've always been one community, and I think that's really beautiful, actually.
Let's talk about what you all are doing in your respective organizations. I think I'll start with you, Rhonda. Can you explain a bit more about Gender Galaxy, your role, and like what in general the organization does.
Yeah, Gender Galaxy started out more or less after a trans and inter event happening in Munich, and there were like several hundred people there living their true authentic selves, which in my head started to click toward the term non-binary, and that opened up so much space for me. And a few people who were there came together and said, hey, maybe we should start a non-binary peer group to talk about issues that we're facing and things like here in Vienna. And that was sort of the starting point. Over the summer, we sat together, thought, where can we do it? And since then, we have monthly meetings where people can come by, talk about when they are questioning the issues they have with support in family or whatever pops up, or just sit around and play some games and eat some snacks. And in 2018, something interesting happened. Alex Jürgen, an intersex person, got a ruling by the Austrian High Court, the Verfassungsgericht, that for gender recognition. So since then, in Austria, it's not only possible to have male or female in your passport or in your birth certificate, actually, but also diverse, inter, having it free or even completely erased. These were the new options, but they put the law for that to make it very specific to intersex people. You have to have a paper certification that you are intersex, and this is something that was blocking other non-binary people to get to something else than just male or female. And so a person started to sue, or started the process, was declined, and then you have to go to court to say, okay, this ruling, I fight against that. And this started in 2021 with the Gender Klage, and also FINIP was founded at the same time because also people from the Gender Galaxy area said, okay, we also want to fight against this. And then things happened. The coalition between Gender Klage and FINIP happened. We are more and more intertwined. Gender Galaxy is still going on. But in FINIP, we are not just doing the gender recognition, but also working on other things like how can we make the German language more accessible? How can we transport, get the news out, do educational content, let people know, like what you said before, I don't understand what this non-binary thing is, and we try to get them to at least some kind of understanding. In the end, it boils down, people are humans and deserve human rights. So treat every people with respect, even if you don't understand where they're coming from or what their background is. And since this beginning of this year, it's now officially possible to get your gender marker changed to diverse, inter, open, or erased. If you don't have an intersex, you don't even need an intersex certification anymore. So it's open for everyone to change their gender marker with support of a so-called Gutachten from one of the three professionals which are able to issue that, like therapists, psychiatrists, or
Psychologists, I think.
psychologists, yeah.
That's awesome. So people can join Gender Galaxy. You all are meeting monthly and coming together.
Exactly. So if you consider yourself on the non-binary spectrum, which is very wide and very inclusive in that sense, or even if you're starting to question whether you might be, you're very welcome to join us and hang out with us. We have a Discord server on which we communicate about things, where you can get some online communication with other people done. And these monthly meetings are still going on, yeah.
Very nice.
Trans and non-binary youth.
Oh God. I'm trying to recollect here because the thing about trans and non-binary youth is I didn't join when it started. So I was only a visitor when it started. But it started out as a few people from different organizations getting together and wanting to create an inclusive youth group for people from 14 to 26 in Vienna. A youth group, in that sense, we can't call ourselves an official youth group because we aren't social workers, we aren't youth workers, but we are a peer group for youth, right? I'm just saying that because legal stuff, but right. So there was different people getting together. There was people from the Organization of Change, people from Vienna, and just also Trans Femme Fatale, right? Also autonomous activists, like just some activists on their own who wanted to participate in this project, and they got together and started to create open meetings. And the goal was to have a meetup for young trans people that is as accessible as possible, where you don't have to apply, where you don't have to send an email or anything, where you can just come and be. And that doesn't cost anything either. That was very important to the people who started it, and is still very important to us now, because a lot of like trans groups and stuff in Vienna are very costly, sadly. So that was important to us. And it started with some first meetings at Flinter, very, very awesome space. We were at Flinter until, I think our last meeting in Flinter was last year at some point. I will greatly miss it. Now we're at VUC. I came to Trans and Non-Binary Youth a bit more than a year ago. I am a counseling person mostly. I'm also in the organization, so I also like work on the social media and stuff, and sometimes like take photos, write texts, give this interview, for example. But mostly my job is to create a program for the people coming to us and do things there. It's just sort of this open room where they can craft, where they can connect, where they can network, where we can play games together, where there's always free food. Something that's recently also been made is that we always also have not only free snacks, but also free warm food. So we have this community kitchen now where people that come to us can also cook together, which is really nice. And it's just a connecting space for trans youth, really. And I feel like it's super, super, super cool that it exists, because first of all, we built this, or the people at first, and then me, built this from the ground up. And it's also important to mention that the organization and the people behind it changed a lot. There was a lot of people who were part of the project, aren't part of it anymore, but there was so much input from so many different walks of life, and I feel like that's also so important for this group. And yeah, now we are a group of a few people again, trying to organize this monthly. So we have a monthly meetup, which is our regular meetup at WUK. And if you're trans non-binary questioning from 14 to 26, the age range is this wide on purpose because we often get asked, because a lot of trans people only come out later in life, which was also important to us to, acknowledge that. But we had to cut it off at some point because it's, a youth focus group. But yeah, it's from 14 to 26. If you ever want a space, just come to us. There's food, there's crafting. We have a pin machine where you can make pins. It's so cool. I love it. And there's always some really cool stuff going on. And I bake really, really mean cookies. So please come. And also, if like meetups are not your thing for whatever reason, that's fine. We also do sort of like special meetups where we do excursion stuff, like go to museums or go on walks together or go to the cinema together. So we also always try to organize something cool monthly, just, stuff that young people maybe like to do. And if you ever wanted to be around young trans people as a young trans person, wanted to make more trans friends who are like you, friends who, think like you maybe, then I feel like trans non-binary youth is a really cool place for you. And everyone's always welcome. Like, it's also really important to us that we don't really, like, there's no investigating or anything. We aren't like, oh, are you really trans, or are you trans enough, or whatever. No, you can just come to us and say as long as you need and want. And there's no pressure for anything. So there's no rigid, program. Can just be, and I feel like that's really needed in the city. So yeah.
So I see that correct me if I'm wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like what both of you are doing in your organizations is kind of not only giving people a sense of community, but also a sense of trans joy.
Yeah.
Like, is that a term that I just made up? No, right?
No. Trans joy exists. It's very real.
Let's talk about that. Like, what is trans joy?
There's even a documentary about that topic coming up at some point.
Really?
Transphoria, it's called. It's still in the working, but it's in the final stage of cutting things. I'm looking forward to seeing that. Trans joy can be many things. It can be just walking outside the villa over that zebra crossing, which is painted in trans bright colors. But it can be so many things. For me, it was like the first few days after I started taking estrogen. When I walked down the stairs, I started some movement in my chest. And I started to specifically walk down in a bouncy way to feel that movement because it gave me so much joy. It might feel stupid, and for people who have breast for a longer time, they usually say, oh, but that hurts so much. And I was like, yeah, but it gives me very much gender affirming joy to feel that.
Yeah.
And it can be so many different things. And for the longest time, I came out like 20 years ago, and I was too afraid to live or be more visible here in my working place, in my environment with people around. I was part of, or I'm still am part of the Debian community, which is a free software community. And we have a conference in different places around the world. And since 2006, the conference that year was in Mexico, and I was wearing a skirt there and feeling at ease with myself and these 2 weeks every year where I was able to wear a skirt gave me so much joy, and especially within a community which was really, really supportive and welcoming, helped me a lot to become true to myself and be more who I am. But it can be really so much things. Like currently I'm in the FIT program from AMS, which stands for Frauen in Handwerk und Technik, which is where you can get education funded by the unemployment service. And before I went there, I was very skeptical how people would react to me. But I had no strange look or anything there, and it was really, really empowering to be in such spaces and just say, oh, Sie sind aber groß. Like this response, like honest responses just to my size and not to my look in the sense, or not challenging that I'm not correct to be there, is something very joyful.
Yeah. And it's insane how it's a default that someone says something. So we expect it already that someone would say something. That's so sad. But then when someone doesn't or gives another response, it's joy, right? So that's really cool. And like I said, there's so many things that can be trans joy. And in Trans Nonbinary Youth, I experience so much secondhand trans joy from other people, because there's these trans people that will be 14 or 15 and remind me of myself when I was that age. And I came out at 12. So I was very early with it. And, I didn't have community though, because I'm from absolutely nowhere. Like I'm from the smallest village you can imagine. And, it was hard because I was without community for a long, long time. And, so when I see people of Trans Nonbinary Youth connecting at like 15 or 14 already with each other, and there's people that already, that met the Trans Nonbinary Youth and then will come together to the next meeting because they're already friends like that, I get so happy and excited, because I just know that our group created connections and created joy in that way. Or for example, we had a clothing swap 2 months ago. And a lot of people just tried on different expressions of gender, because, clothing is so heavily connected to gender. And some people tried on things that they would never probably do at home. There were a lot of younger trans femmes, for example, who were like, this is the first time I'm wearing a skirt in front of people and it feels so nice. And it's just really emotional even to see that, because they get so happy. I don't know. So I feel like trans joy in itself is so many little moments. And trans joy as a subject and as a concept is super revolutionary, because there's still this narrative of a trans person who is completely miserable. And this narrative is what the right wing wants, what transphobes want of us. They want us to be miserable, and they want us to it's harsh, but they want us to be broken. And, I feel like joy is an act of resistance. It has been discussed a lot, but especially in trans contexts, it is really powerful. Because if we persevere, then we show them that they can't really break us. And this starts with community, I think. I think this starts with community. Like obviously there's also moments where you're on your own experiencing trans joy, when you put on your first binder, or when you wear your first skirt or your first bra. These are also these little moments. And I feel like these are really needed as a revolutionary act of surviving as a trans person, because you really, really, really need this to know, I want to go this way. I will live this way, and I will be okay as myself, because I can be myself. So yeah, trans joy is super crucial, actually. Especially on trans visibility today, which, I feel like it should also be about joy. Yeah.
Okay, well, I promised I wouldn't take up too much time. Do we have any last words? Anything you want to share? Anything that I didn't maybe get to?
Love your trans siblings. It's just what I want to tell the people out there. Like, love us, show us love and respect and care, and check on them during these times. I feel like that's very important.
Be brave enough to show your uncertainties and come up to us. We don't bite unless we are asked to. No, but it's like, yeah, I don't know how to say something, but then, okay, we can walk you through. We know, we feel it when there's some uncertainty of you interacting with us. And it feels much more included when you come up to it. Hey, I want to ask you something. I just don't know how, or, but don't be invasive in your questions if the connection isn't there yet.
Yeah, learn, but with respect, right? Yeah, and also to trans people who might listen, I know it's hard. I really know it's hard, and I'm not going to give the "it gets better" talk, but genuinely, you'll be so beautiful one day. You already are, but you'll find yourself so beautiful one day already, and that's what makes it all worth it. I'm so serious. Like, I've seen this moment happen so many times with myself, with my wife, who can't believe how beautiful she is right now, who can't believe how much she loves herself now, and I feel like this moment makes it really worth it. So, yeah, I just want young trans people especially to know, in the end, it is going to be okay. So, yeah.
Awesome. And everyone can go to the Trans Day of Visibility events today.
Today, yeah. Everyone's invited. Yeah, and it's going to be really cool. There's a broad program. There's musicians and poetry and drag and everything. So, yeah, it's a 2V in 19th district. And yeah, it's going to be really cool.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming in.
Wow.
Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah.
Yes. Happy Trans Day of Visibility.
To you too. Are you cis, Denise?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because I wasn't sure,
Shocking.
Yeah. But you're like cis plus to me.
Cis
because
plus?
because with you, I know that you've at least reflected on your gender, You've at least reflected on it.
Okay, let me stop the live.